This plant here is Hyoscyamus niger, which is henbane. It's a part of the deadly nightshade family, so that's the Solanaceae family. And around us here, actually, there's a lot of self-seeded Solanaceae or deadly nightshade plants. Actually, there's big datura behind us. It's related to belladonna, it's related to potato, to tomato, to your bell peppers, to aubergine, to ashwagandha. That's also a Solanaceae family herb. So a lot of the Solanaceae family are medicinal plants as well as foods. This is one of them, although this medicinal plant isn't actually used commonly in practice here in Ireland. Anyway, you don't use it in clinical practice because it is poisonous. Like all of the Solanaceae plants, it contains tropane alkaloids of different varieties, and in larger doses it is toxic. So we don't use it in clinical practice here, and it's not to be used internally, but in many countries it is still used as a medicine, and it has a long-standing history as a traditional medicine in Britain and Ireland, where it's native to Britain, and yeah, across Europe as well. It has a long history of use. So this is henbane, as I said, a really gorgeous plant. This plant is probably only about 8 weeks old, I'd say, and it's actually still really warm here. It's the 1st of October, if you can believe it, and scorching hot today, like any kind of summer's day. This plant is self-seeded here in one of the polytunnels, as I said. So it's only young. It was probably about July or end of July or something that it actually self-seeded. So it's quite young, but you can see the size of it. It's actually massive. When it grows outside, it's a lot smaller, a lot closer to the ground, probably only about maybe 3 feet high. And as the name suggests, it is poisonous. It's poisonous to hens. Interestingly, the only animal it seems to be not that poisonous to is pigs. And funny enough, when we grew it outside and we had it, self-seeding around the herb garden, our hens never really touched the seeds or anything like that. And the pigs used to often break into the herb garden and ravage through different herbs, but they never touched this plant either. So, but it is, as I said, toxic. Traditionally, it was used as an anodyne, so a pain-relieving herb. It is hypnotic and it is very sedative. So it was used pre-operative to actually anaesthetize and to sedate somebody for operation. So that was its main use, but it has a long history of use for any kind of spasmodic action in the body. As I said, it's hypnotic, it's antispasmodic, especially on the muscles. So any kind of muscular pain, whether it was colic or whether it was asthma, that kind of spasmodic action happening in the bronchi, or any kind of rheumatic pains and things like that, this herb would have been used. So it would have been used in tincture form, and it was the leaves and flowering tops like this, so the full leaves and flowering tops of the plant, exactly the way it is now. So it's in flower at the moment, and it would have been harvested then when it's in flower, and it would have been made into tinctures, and it would have been extracted into oils and things like that. So, as I said, I don't use this herb in clinical practice, and you shouldn't take it internally because it is all about dosage, and in higher amounts and larger amounts it is toxic. So all parts of this plant are toxic, and actually it's said that even smelling the flowers bring giddiness. It was actually used in brewing as well, which reminds me, and it was thought to any kind of beers that were brewed out of henbane, made you very giddy. So again, that, and even touching the plant, it's quite oily, so often when I'm harvesting some of these plants like belladonna or henbane, you can start to notice it just from actually absorbing the oils on the plant into your skin. So you have to be careful growing it, although it's a beautiful plant to grow, as I said. And it's really interesting. It always reminds me the way it grows. If you notice here, it's got like this kind of a spine-like effect to it, and all the flowers come along the spine here. And it does really remind me of its uses, that it does work on the neurosystem. It is neurotoxic as well. And that it does affect the spine and the brain in this hypnotic way. It sedates. It's a very sedative plant and works on the whole nervous system. So that always reminds me of that. But stunning looking, and it's so tall. You may have heard of henbane in relation to it being a baneful herb, so it was considered one of the witches' herbs. There's lots of witches' herbs, but this was one of them, and it was thought of as to be part of one of the traditional flying ointment for witches. So they would have used the plant fresh as a poultice like this, or made an oil out of it and rubbed it on themselves, and because it is psychotropic, it would have actually induced this feeling of flying. So that was the reason why it was considered one of their flying ointment herbs. The herbalist Chevalier actually talks about using it externally as an oil. So again, the flowering tops and leaves like this into an oil. So I'm going to experiment with that and make some oils out of this lovely henbane here, to apply externally only onto the muscles or rheumatic pains, for like that lovely antispasmodic action. He talks about using it for sciatic pain. So it'll be interesting to test that out on ourselves and see how it works. But yeah, nice to make some oils out of it and use it externally, as I said, rather than taking it internally, because it's a plant that's not to be taken internally. But yeah, a really nice plant, and actually the leaves of it, again fresh leaves like this, would have been used externally as a poultice for things like rheumatic pains and for things like gout. So yeah, tons and tons of uses, and really like beneficial plant. But as I said, it's just gone out of use now because it is toxic. People would veer away from it, and there are plenty of other antispasmodic and hypnotic and sedative herbs that we would use that are safe, that we would use instead. But again, it's part of our tradition as herbalists and our traditional Western herbal medicine. Henbane is a massive part of that. So it's a really lovely plant to actually grow and to be connected with. And just enjoy, it's so stunning. So it's really nice to have those kind of plants growing here in the garden, and in this tunnel, as I said, where it's just self-seeded. So before I get too giddy smelling its beautiful flowers, that's really, yeah, that's henbane.